Welcome back to the School of Muscle podcast. Today, Dr. Zabaleta-Korta, I definitely pronounced his name wrong, but he's very generous and being okay with that. So he'll maybe give you the correct pronunciation. I'll make sure to have it linked in the description as well as the study that he's done in the description below. But today we are going to discuss one of his studies that he's done, and the title of that study is Regional Hypertrophy, the Effect of Exercises at Long and Short Muscle Lengths in Recreationally Trained Women. So that's what we're going to kind of cover today. But I think a first good kind of place for us to start here is what kind of led you to wanting to do this study in the first place?
Well, I think for this we should go back to my PhD. This study is the third study of my PhD, which I'm presenting my thesis on September next month. So this is the third part, the final part of the PhD. We began. Well, first off, thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Your pronunciation is not that bad, so let's hope that my name, which is correctly spoken, Zabaleta-Korta, it's quite okay. And following with the question, I think that it led to me, our first study was kind of trying to know which was causing regional hypertrophy. We just wanted to see if there was a common path within all the studies that analyze regional hypertrophy. And we saw that some kind of contractions, some kind of exercises tend to lead into a kind of hypertrophy. So the second study of our thesis was made on the quadriceps muscle. We saw that there was a pattern that leg extensions led to different hypertrophy than the squats. So in this final study, in which we analyzed the biceps muscle, we saw that, well, we wanted to know if this concept is quite new, but if the resistant profile of the exercise had anything to do with the hypertrophy differences between exercises. Simply said, we wanted to know if the resistance of the exercise was the reason behind that different exercises promoted different hypertrophy in a same muscle.
Gotcha. So if I'm understanding things correctly, you had some prior research that kind of showed some different hypertrophy patterns between different exercises. So you guys wanted to find out, okay, is that due to kind of the resistance profile of that exercise?
I think it's Michael Israetel, the one that introduced this concept, and I thought it was really interesting. In fact, the title was going to be Regional Hypertrophy and Resistance Profiles, but there was some reviewer that didn't like the name, so we just changed it.
Yeah. Cool. So that kind of led you into doing the study here, and kind of leading into it, did you have any kind of expectations up front? Like, what was your guys' hypothesis here? Did you think that the resistance profile of the exercise differentially impacted the regional hypertrophy, or what were you guys kind of thinking heading into this?
We expected to find that, well, there's a trend in many regional hypertrophy studies that is, if you work the muscle at long lengths, the region that mostly grows is the final part, the one that is most close to the distal joint. In this case, the part of the biceps that is closest to the elbow. It is also seen in some studies that, for example, when we work the quadriceps muscles at long lengths, the region that is closest to the knee grows more. So we expected to find that the group that performed preacher curls would grow majorly in the region that is closest to the elbow. And we expected to find also that the opposite, the other group that performed an exercise which is completely opposite in the resistance profile, would grow in the other region, the one that is closest to the shoulder.
Perfect. So you guys expected to see these kind of regional hypertrophy differences based on the different resistance profile of the exercises here. So I think that kind of sets up well what kind of led you to wanting to do this study, as well as kind of your expectations heading in. So what did you guys kind of decide to do for this study? What were your kind of methods of the study here?
I don't know how things work where you live, but in Spain, research is not, this doesn't have much of funding. So we just had one ultrasound machine, and we were going to use it. In this kind of research, obviously, the the golden standard is the magnetic resonance imagery, but it's really, really hard to find, and even harder to use it for hypertrophy purposes, because it is used in the cancer research, for example, but it's not easy to use for the workout field. So we have an ultrasound machine that we would use it, and then the optimum way to measure hypertrophy is in 2 dimensions. But in the previous study that we did in the quadriceps muscle, after the study, we received a letter to the editor by some top research on our field, asking that our protocol was not a standard protocol. It is not somehow accepted in the scientific community. So we decided to make 1-dimension measurements. So we measure hypertrophy by muscle thickness using ultrasound. So when the subjects came here, we just divided them into 2 groups, trying to make both groups equal. Obviously, the allocation of subjects into groups was absolutely blinded for us. And then all these subjects trained for 9 months. They were all women, and all of them had at least 2 years of resistance training experience. And after 9 weeks of training or only biceps training, so they couldn't do any other training for biceps, just the exercise we allocated them, but they could train other parts of their body. For example, lower body, no problem, and upper body, they could train it, but they couldn't make any back exercises because we considered it could somehow interfere in our results.
So you had trained women come in and perform different bicep exercises. One of them was, did you say one of them was a preacher curl? And then the other one, that was one that focused more on kind of the shortened position, right?
We chose 2 exercises that were completely different in the resistance profile. One of them was very hard at the beginning when the biceps is lengthened, and the other one, it was very hard at the end, which is when the biceps is shortened. It was the inclined bicep curl, which is the one you perform seated, like lying, and then you just, I don't know how to say it in English. It's kind of weird.
So you had these trained women come in and they implemented this kind of bicep training program in which they either did a bicep exercise that was kind of most challenging in the lengthened position or more challenging in the shortened position. And
exactly.
And kind of based on this, you looked at their muscle thickness over the course of this kind of certain time period for the training protocol. So is there anything else that you wanted to mention here regarding the methods before we kind of turn into the results here?
Well, I think it is important that once you've already made the study and you already had the data, I think I kind of regret not choosing another design. But obviously, once you've already done the whole study and you got the data, it's impossible to go back. But one of the reviewers of our study, that is Dr. Wolf, which is quite known in the United States, he suggested me to use one arm from one exercise and the other one for the other exercise, which is very good. I think that's a good design. When I thought about it previously, I just thought that there could be an interference because, the cross education matter. But I think I regret not choosing that design because I think it's very useful and we can have much more data and much more subjects using that protocol. Unfortunately, we didn't use it, so due to the high dropout rate, one of the groups ended up with just 13 subjects, which is very, very low subject for us.
Yep, and that's one aspect of science is not every time you're going to pick the absolutely perfect design, but you still have to kind of make inferences based on the data you have and kind of do the best with what you got. So I think,
yes.
Yeah, so I kind of think with that, what did you guys kind of find here? Did you actually match your expectations? Did you see different regional hypertrophy based on the 2 different kind of resistance profiles, or what were your guys' results here?
One of the hypotheses proved to be true because when you work out the biceps in a lengthened position in the preacher curl, we analyzed 3 regions of the arm. The one that was closest to the elbow was the one that grew most. In fact, the only one that grew at all.
Interesting.
But in the other group, which is the group that performed the inclined curls, we didn't show that any of the regions grew. I mean, no regions grew at all. So I think that here we should show that there are two important insights. One of them is that when you perform an exercise and the muscle is lengthened, the hypertrophy potential is much higher. And we can see this in other pieces of research. But, and I think that for that reason, we didn't show any growth in any of the regions. The region that grew was the one that grew most. And probably there were other regions that also grew, but we didn't have enough statistical power to show them.
Gotcha. So the group that had the resistance profile in which it was most challenging in the lengthened position, you saw significant growth for that group. But for the group that where it was most difficult in the shortened position, you guys didn't see significant growth in that group. And your guys' kind of rationale for that is because the lengthened position probably just provides more overall total stimulus than the group that trained in the shortened position, potentially suggesting that training in lengthened positions is more stimulative for hypertrophy compared to shortened positions. And was the group in the lengthened position, did you also mention that growth was more in the kind of distal portion of their bicep?
Yes, we made two types of comparisons. We measured the growth of every region pre to post, and we also compared the growth between all the regions, all between them. For example, one region with the other, that region with the next one. So in the analysis that we did, in which we compared one region pre to post, we saw that the one which is closest to the elbow grew, but the rest of the region didn't grow, even when you compared pre to post or when you compared them to other regions. And I think that that's because of the type 2 statistical error. We didn't have enough subjects to properly analyze the growth. But that's not incorrect. I think our findings are right.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, I think with that kind of summarizes your results pretty well here. So did these results in particular surprise you at all? I'm guessing that they probably didn't, considering they kind of matched your hypothesis. Or were there any other findings here that you didn't really expect, or were they pretty kind of in line with what you guys thought at the start?
Yes, I was quite shocked to see that only one region grew. I mean, it was a finding we didn't expect it. It's not a common finding in the regional hypertrophy studies, because right now in my thesis, I have analyzed all the studies that include the regional hypertrophy analysis. And from 46 studies, only one study didn't find differences in regional hypertrophy. So we can say regional hypertrophy happens. Now our challenge is to know why it happens. So it's not common that from 3 regions analyzed in 2 groups, only one grew. And I think that's our mistake, because there weren't enough subjects, but we were shocked by that finding because it's not common. It may also have been influenced by the fact that women don't have as big bum muscles as men. So probably if we had chosen male subjects, that would have been different. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all those are kind of fair conclusions to make from that. And kind of with that, based on maybe not even just this study, but maybe on other research that you've done, like clearly talking to you here, you've definitely, looked into other research on regional hypertrophy and differences in that. And, you definitely are interested in the subject and look at kind of the totality of research here. So kind of based on research on regional hypertrophy, are there any kind of practical takeaways that you might give someone listening to this, wanting to kind of maximize their own progress, or even if they're coaching clients, like, are there any kind of takeaways in this area that they should consider?
There's a very curious case in the regional hypertrophy field, which is the case of leg extensions. I think it is the only pattern that is so clear that you can't deny it anyway. And that's if you perform leg extensions, if you train with leg extensions, the head of the quadriceps that will grow the most will be the rectus femoris. And it's strange because in the regional hypertrophy field, there are like 2 clear patterns. One of them is that training a muscle in a lengthened position trains the part that is closest to the distal joint, and this finding is not clear in all the studies. It's a trend that you can see in most of them, but not all of them. But I think that all studies, except for one, that analyze leg extensions have shown that the head that grows most is rectus femoris. So if you want an amazing rectus femoris, you can do leg extensions.
It sounds like with the kind of totality of the evidence on regional hypertrophy, when training at long muscle lengths, it seems like the more kind of distal portion of that muscle tends to grow a little bit more. It's not shown in all studies, but there might be a little bit of a trend towards that. But in particular for leg extensions, you see more growth in the rectus femoris when doing those compared to maybe some other quad exercises. Does that sound like a fair summary there?
Yes, that's a very good summary, in fact.
Awesome. And, for me, looking at this research, I'll give you maybe some of my practical takeaways that I'll use with clients and stuff, and then you can let me know where I'm off track or whatever it might be there. But kind of for me, considering this, it does seem as though there is a trend to seeing some differences in regional hypertrophy based on the resistance profile. So when I'm coaching a client, when we have a muscle group like the biceps or something like that, I will try to include a variety of exercises with different resistance profiles. So I'll include exercises that train the muscle in more of a lengthened position, but I'll also include some exercises that are a little bit harder in that shortened position as well, and also have exercises that kind of they have a similar resistance profile throughout most of the range, more of a kind of traditional profile. Does that seem like a reasonable kind of practical takeaway to include exercises with various resistance profiles and maybe even leaning towards exercises that are a little bit harder in the lengthened position, as it seems as though research points to that being maybe a little bit more stimulative, as maybe your research here did as well? Or what do you kind of think about those practical takeaways there?
I think you're right. And I think that we should focus on resistance profiles that emphasize muscle in a lengthened position. Because we have seen that previous research by other researchers in other fields have shown that training a muscle at long lengths, it seems to bring more stimulus to our muscle. So taking that and taking this research, I think we can say that most of the training should be focused on this kind of resistance that is very hard at long lengths and not that hard at short lengths. But I think that definitely looking for some diversity or resistant profiles seems very interesting to maximize the stimulus to the muscle.
Perfect. Well, are there any other kind of practical takeaways or anything else that you want to kind of leave the audience with regarding this evidence? Or if not, we can kind of move on to one last subject here.
I think that with your research, you realize that the takeaways is something that everything looks for, but it's very hard to take. So in fact, from all the evidence I have analyzed, which is like 50 articles, there are just 2 trends, and both of them are not so clear. So I think that from a scientific point of view, it's enough from the takeaways, but I am like kind of a bit sad because there are not any other interesting things coming here. But research is like this. When you begin researching, you are like a kid, like, I'm going to discover really interesting things, and Brad Schoenfeld is going to say I'm a great researcher. But then you end up seeing that your research area is not easy. Research is not easy. Things are very complicated, and I am very happy with my research. I think that what we found, it's very interesting and will help people, but it's not still that conclusive.
Yep, absolutely. And that's kind of, I think Brad Schoenfeld's mentioned before that research doesn't necessarily prove anything. It just kind of provides more evidence for something to be kind of more or less true. And I think with all research, there's also like a lot of practical practical difficulties with it. I don't know why I could say that other word I was trying to say, but like I've talked to researchers in the past where like most study lengths are like 8 weeks because that's what they can fit in within a semester of college, because a lot of research is done in college students. And then like what you said with your study here, like, maybe the best way to measure muscle growth would be using like an MRI or something like that. But that is highly impractical to do for most people, especially with research groups that maybe have less funding and stuff like that. So, I think that people, when they're just like hammering on studies online, pointing out all these criticisms and stuff like that, it's important to like consider like, hey, these guys are doing the best they can with the funding they have, with the practical implications of most studies, be it on like college students and different things like that. So I think people need to be a little bit easier on researchers in general.
It's so long and such a long process, because once you're finished with all that work, when not enough funding, problems with for example, when we were taking data for this study, the COVID pandemic just stopped us, and we have to make the study shorter than what we expected. Some subjects had to drop out because they tested positive. So it's like, after all that, you present your paper, which is your work, and you've worked like months for that, and a reviewer said, okay, this is just it.
Yep, it's tough. I know, like for my master's degree, I just did one kind of study, and that was like enough for me. Like, I have so much respect for you guys that are out there doing regular research. Like, it's not easy work. Like, it's definitely a challenging thing to do for sure. So with that, what's kind of next for you? Are there any studies that you're currently working on, or anything that you're looking forward to, or what are you kind of excited about right now in the terms of kind of hypertrophy research?
I think it's I'm interested in two fields. One of them is, which are the minimums we can reach to grow? I mean, people right now, it's so busy. Many of my clients just have like less than an hour to train during the day, and they can train like 3 days. So I want to know which is the minimum training for them to grow. And I'm also trying to go deeper into the resistance profile stuff, because I think that we should still kind of make clear some things that are not clear there.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. I think that a lot of my like general population clients, like they might have a total of 3 hours per week to train. So it's like, okay, what training strategy is best to kind of hit Dr. Mike Israel's coined kind of their minimum effective volume? Like, what is going to be enough for them to grow here, in which we can pack in the most training in the least amount of time? So I will definitely be on the lookout for future research that you're doing here, and make sure to kind of get you back on kind of discuss everything. So kind of with that,
I'll be happy to be back.
Awesome. So kind of with that, if people want to make sure that they're following you on any other things that you're doing, is there places that they can go online to make sure that they're staying up to date with the work that you're doing?
They can follow me on the Instagram, or they can follow me on ResearchGate, where I upload all my work and all my publications that are less frequent that I would like for them to be. But okay, I do my best.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed it.
All right, Ryan.